All right. It's good to be back. Been a long time since I've streamed. Got a new baby, keeping me really busy. But I had an itch that I wanted to scratch, and I wrote some code, and it made me really happy, so I want to share it. Um, like lots of people, development environments will be the death of me, especially working on multiple different computers. And, it's ridiculous trying to get some applications to work on a Mac or trying to get them to work on Linux. Having a consistent development environment is a big deal, and having isolated development environments is really important to me as well. So what I did was create a solution based on LXD, and if you're not familiar with LXD, you can go to lxdcontainers.org. And hi Alex, how you doing? Good to see you. Strange noise sort of whirring. I hope it's not the Surface Book over here in the background that's running my titles. You want to see some pretty titles though? I mean, look at this. Yeah. Hmm. Maybe if I pull down the audio gain a little bit, does that help? The guitars are in front of me now instead of behind me. I had to switch my desk around because I have too much damn equipment. Okay, so what we have here is a fresh Ubuntu 20.04 server, and I installed LXD on it, which is a simple sudo snap install LXD, and then made a few configuration assumptions and wrote some software. So let's start with just the basics of what LXD is. LXD is a daemon that controls LXC containers, and LXC containers were the original implementation of Docker. Docker used to run LXC containers. Then it changed to a different container implementation, but originally they were LXC containers. And LXD is a nice layer on top of that container system that lets you do network configuration and lots of other cool stuff. So more confusingly, you start the LXD daemon, but you interact with it using the LXC command. So on the server, I can type LXC ls. It shows me that there are no containers running. I could start a container, launch Ubuntu, and that starts a container running whatever the latest Ubuntu is. So that's cool. Much like Docker, you can bind mount things in, and you can do most of the containery things that you expect. Interestingly though, if you look at my file system, I have the entire 1 TB hard drive here as a ZFS partition, ZFS pool, that's backing all of my containers. And ZFS is copy on write, and LXD is really, you can't see my screen. Of course you can't see my screen. Hang on. All right, hang on a second. Just do this the hard way. All right, no floating head over the top of it because I rebooted something and that all went away. Sorry. There we go. Okay, so hopefully you see a screen now. All right, so we're looking at my Ubuntu server, stock Ubuntu. The only thing I've done is install LXD and then I have a whole hard drive dedicated to a ZFS pool. So Z pool, I don't know anything about ZFS. Let's try Z pool list. So I've got one Z pool called LXD, and it's pretty darn empty. So that's cool. So yeah, that's LXD in a nutshell. You can start containers. Thanks, Dustin. I appreciate your forgiveness, especially since I've been out of this game for so long. It's been a long time since I streamed. It's like I got to put the training wheels back on. I do have a lot of fancy equipment that I picked up while I was on leave, though. I've got all these really pretty titles. Look at those titles. Isn't that sexy? I did that. Got a nice opening screen that I totally forgot to use. Good stuff. All right, so I'm going to remove that container because I don't need it. What did I call it? My container. Still have that hiss, huh? I'm going to have to figure that out before I stream again. I have a lot of crap running through audio here, and I have no idea what that could be. So I apologize that it's a mess. I'll figure it out next stream, and I'll keep this one shorter. Okay, so cool thing about LXD is that you have the idea of profiles. And I have two profiles on this machine. Let's look at one of them. The default profile, it's just a YAML file, and this says that this piece right here says anytime I run a container, user ID 1000 on my host machine will be the same as user ID 1000 inside the container. So I always have permissions correct when I do file shares, and that's a big deal. And then I have a Ethernet bridge so that the containers can get out of the network, and there's not much more exciting about that profile. But if we look at the next profile, this one's where the fun starts to begin. I created a Ethernet bridge called BR0, and in containers where I attach this profile, the Ethernet will be bridged to my home network. So instead of having LXD provide NAT to my containers, they're actually peers to the rest of my network. So let's create a container. So let's launch Ubuntu. We'll call it my bridge profile default. Profile. All right, so we'll create this container called my bridge with both profiles. And instead of the weird 10.173 address, I got a 10.0.1.110 address, which is on my network at home. So let's open up a new shell. Ping it first. What did I call it? My bridged? My bridge. So I can ping it, but I won't be able to SSH because it doesn't know anything about my username or my keys. Instead, we can use LXC exec to get in the container if we care, but we don't because we have code for fixing those kinds of things. So let's stop it. And then let's get to the good stuff. So you know about LXD, LXC, and about profiles. The rest of this is all convention over configuration. So I built an app called DLX or Deluxe, and it is just a small wrapper over the LXD API, and it uses a handful of assumptions. And the first assumption is that you built your own image for using LXD. So if you look at my root directory here on the LXD server, there is a .config directory. And then there's a recipes. And here there's a base.yaml file. And this is the YAML file that Canonical uses when they build distributions for LXC and LXD. So it's literally just a description of how to build a release of a Linux thing. And what I did was take their base Ubuntu install, and I changed very few things. I added OpenSSH server so that OpenSSH server would be available. And then I added both the repository location for Tailscale and then the package to install Tailscale. So using a tool called Distro Builder, you point it at one of these YAML files and it creates a disk image. And then LXD can import that disk image, and now I can use it for anything. So if I do LXC image list, you can see that I've created an image. Let's see the aliases here. Oh, here it is, DLX base. Yes, Dustin, you're absolutely right that you can do it all via Cloud Init. The difference is that if you use Cloud Init after you spin up the container, then Cloud Init starts. And that's fine if you need to do things just in time, like in download code or whatever. But I want my containers to be available now. So instead of taking the hit at container spin up time, I have a cron job that rebuilds my containers every night and re-uploads them to the LXD server, which happens while I sleep and it doesn't make my container startup slow. So knowing that we have this deluxe base image, we can create a container like that, but we're going to do that in code. So let's go back to my code and take a look. This is a basic Cobra app, and it has a handful of commands. So let's take a look at the commands that are available. So Deluxe has config, connect, create, exec, list, remove, start, stop. So let's do a Deluxe list. And it will list all of the containers that are running on the server. Now, I'm on my Mac. Let's see, uname. I'm on my Mac, Darwin M1, but the host is a Linux server in the closet over in my bedroom. How am I connecting? Well, I'm connecting over the LXD API. So in order to do that, I have to use a little bit more configuration than I was hoping to use, including I'd have the host name, and I have to have a client key and a client certificate for the LXD server. So in order to do that, I used homebrew install LXC. So I've got LXC on my Mac, and you can type LXC remote, and it gives you some options to connect to and list and modify remote servers. So I did a LXC remote add. It asked me for the password for my LXD server, and once that happened, in my config directory in LXC, you can see that the client and server swapped keys. So now I have a client certificate and a client key that are trusted by the LXD server. So at that point, I can pass those keys into my app here, and now I have a trusted connection to the LXD server, which is why I can do deluxe list. because it's connecting using a trusted TLS connection. I also had to give it my SSH private key so that I can make an SSH connection to the server when I provision a machine, or provision a container. When we provision a container, there's a handful of things that we have to do that can't be done over the API. So connect makes the connection to the server. Create creates an instance. Let's do a create real quick. And you can see the one last bit that I haven't completed yet is here in the last bit of create. It needs to run an LXC container modification to add a profile, to add a disk to the container, and that's the last thing that needs to be done. We can probably finish that while we're on stream. So let's do a create. We'll call this one Dustin, because he's been watching my LXD and LXC playing for a couple years now. All right, so I have this stub session.run. I'm making an SSH connection to that server, and I just have a ps-eaf to prove that the SSH connection works. So I can ping it from my Mac, and I can SSH directly from my Mac, and now I'm in that container. And that's a Linux machine, and it's a LXC container on the Ubuntu server in my closet. So instant spin up, which is the big reason that I didn't use Cloud.init Dustin, because it's literally instant. And then when I'm done with it, I can remove it, stop it, and that's it. It's so fast to spin these up that it's ridiculous. It makes me really happy. Maybe 3-4 seconds, and it's instantly online and instantly available. And the nice thing about it is, because it has SSH already installed, I can use VS Code remote and connect to host, and I'm in and done with a new server. Now this is also a standard Ubuntu install, so if you wanted to have a Kubernetes cluster, you wanted to run K3S, you make 3 of them and spin up a Kubernetes cluster over LXD without any pain at all. It's super lightweight. So super easy, really fun way to provision up instances. And the last thing that I want to show you is not working in the Go version of this, but it is working in a Bash version of this. So I'm going to SSH over to my Linux laptop and show that off. So this was the thing that I was originally going to show off on this stream. It's the same thing as my Go app, except it's written in Bash. And because there really wasn't much need to use Go, the problem is that Mac ships an old Bash, and the Bash tools that I was using, the Bash libraries that I was using, don't work in Mac's old Bash, because Apple has some sort of license thing going on with Bash, whatever. So we can do a DLX. What do we do for DLX? I don't remember. Oh. ALEXA, thought I was talking to her. Run, so DLX run, unknown command. We'll call this one sharing. this does the same thing. It creates a container with the two profiles that I wanted. But it didn't bind. So the thing I was trying to show off that didn't work here either was it's supposed to create a directory called the same name as the container and then bind mount it into the container so that you have a directory on the host bound into a directory on the container, and you have an easy way to back up your stuff. I don't know why the create command didn't work. Should work. Well, that LXC exec shouldn't be in the container. It should create that directory. Oh, here it is. See. So what I was doing here was making this so that it would work on the local machine or work on a remote machine. So this RC is a bash variable that substitutes in SSH your name at the host for these things, and that got really complicated really fast, so I abandoned that, bailed. Who wants to worry about interpolating strings over a SSH connection? It wasn't me. So anyway, the last thing I need to do here is make that SSH connection create a directory. So let's take a look at that. So we want to make a directory with the same name as the container, and we should have the container called name. So we should be able to make dir -p home projects So that should create the directory for our container. It didn't complain. And we have a directory called make directory, which is a good sign. So the last thing we need to do is run the command that binds the container directory into, binds the host directory into the container directory. So let me go get that from the machine here. Alright, so the command that we're going to run looks like this. LXC config device add to the container, and then the name of the device, the source, and the path. So let's actually send that over this connection. So we've got device add container. We'll call it deluxe bind again, which is fine. Disk. Path. It's a lot of strings all at once. I'm not sure if that's going to work, but let's give it a try anyway. I'm not afraid. All right, so let's make a new one. We'll call it Pray For Me. Session already started. Oh. Session.run. Well, I'm not really sure what the problem with that is. I use Make for everything. Not because Make is amazing. I don't even really know how to use Make to its fullest extent, but it's like a map of what needs to be done. You know, you want to get dependencies? Just go get. And build it, test it. It's just like a really easy, it's documentation. Inherent documentation. Implicit. All right, let's see if that makes any difference. Nope. So we make our client, we defer the close, we have a new session, we defer the close, then we run something. Session only accepts one call to run, start, shell, output, or combined output. So guess we have to have multiple sessions. That's fine. Process exited with status 1. Well, who knows? I'm definitely doing something wrong. Let's take a look at the server and see how much of it. Last prayer got created. Let's look and see if our bind mount got bind mounted. Oh, I never even showed this off though. Check this out. So I have Deluxe Connect, and remember I'm on my Mac. So Deluxe Connect. I'm in the machine. Yeah, I didn't make the projects directory or bind it, but that's okay. I'll get it working. So that's where we're at. Very exciting. Hi, Carlos. Thanks for joining us. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. I just need to get this last bit for bind mounting the project directory done, and I'll be set. So thanks for joining me today. This is my easy entrance back into streaming. I appreciate you watching. Take care.